SpongeBob, a show darker than most, known for its scenes of intense horror and cruelty. But is there more than what meets the eye? Today, I'm going to deep dive into this show, and I'm going to uncover... No, I'm kidding. This is just more slop content. I'm going to be going over every SpongeBob character, explaining what there is to know about them, and some more fun facts as well. Also, I'd appreciate it if you considered subscribing. I really want to get to 10k by the end of the year. I don't know how realistic that is really, but I'd super appreciate it if y'all could just feed my ego. But yeah, let's get back to the regularly scheduled slop content. Okay, first character, Marty. He has his only appearance in the show in the episode I'm with Stupid, where he shows up to Patrick's house under the pretense of being his dad who's visiting for annual Starfish Day. Throughout the episode, SpongeBob plays dumb to make Patrick look smarter in comparison in front of his parents. He eventually breaks character when he's fed up with the whole stupid friend act, but Marty and his wife Janet stay strong and believe that their son isn't dumb at all like SpongeBob is claiming. However, it doesn't take long after this for Patrick to ask his parents their names and then realizes that they aren't his parents at all. They're literally just a couple starfish that showed up and are acting like they're Patrick's parents. Before they can give a real explanation to what actually happened, Squidward comes by with Patrick's actual parents. If any of y'all have some theory on who Marty could be, definitely let me know because I looked everywhere I could and there's just nothing on Marty except for this one episode. On top of that, looking through the SpongeBob fandom wiki page, which is where I get all this information from, I saw somebody comment that he looks like Hank Hill but without glasses, and it just seems blasphemous to me because I'm a huge King of the Hill fan. I live and die by King of the Hill. I just think it's wrong, you know, it's messed up, man. You don't look like Marty at all. Okay, the mayor. This one's a little bit less interesting. He is never actually given a real name, but he's the mayor in the show for Bikini Bottom and even New Cub City at one point, until he actually elects SpongeBob for a little bit. He was also a food judge in one episode and awarded the Krusty Krab the Golden Cornucopia for their nature patty. Okay, hold on to your square pants here because big twist. He's also the mayor up until the live-action SpongeBob musical when he was replaced with Mrs. Mayor, who's already received more screen time than her predecessor. And, you know, yet again, the liberal media grabbing SpongeBob by the balls and replacing the great mayor with a woman. I don't remember writing this. Did I write this? Hold on. Mini Patricks. This one is pretty straightforward. It's just a bunch of little smaller versions of Patrick that were created in the episode Copy Bob Ditto Pants. In this episode, the regular sized Patrick is hit by a lawnmower and brutally mangled and turned into these little fellas. Who are the same as him, but small and tiny and just run around and whatnot, you know? Music school head mistress. This lady first shows up in the episode Professor Squidward, where she mistakes Squidward for Squilliam and invites him to teach a class at her school, the Bikini Bottom Prestigious Music College. Later in the episode, she realizes that he isn't Squilliam, and for some reason this warrants her to send SpongeBob to jail. I don't really know. Her character is used several times as just like a background model in fancy environments, like in Lady Upturn's mansion or in the city hall at the wedding. Pedro is this silly little guy with coin dispensers around his waist, and he makes his only appearance in Slimy Dancing. After an unnamed purple fish performs at the dance-a-thon, it's revealed that Pedro was in his hair the whole time. Because the rules of the contest specify that dancers cannot have partners, the purple fish is disqualified. This is the last that we ever get to see of Pedro, but between you and me, I think he should have been added to the main cast. Plastic Surgeon. This is the guy who helps Patrick choose a new nose in the episode No Nose Nose. He says that he won't stop until every customer is 100% satisfied, but as Patrick is browsing for a new nose, the doctor gets impatient and takes him off to the surgery room to start the procedure. Definitely not the most ethical doctor. He also has a visible scar on his head, which implies a recent facelift, which is really apparent looking at his more plasticky looking face. Purple Cellmate. He's kind of just a guy in the jail who shows up twice in the series. First in the episode Jailbreak, which is set inside Bikini Bottom prison after Plankton gets locked up. Purple Cellmate can be seen taking Plankton's food, and then later on him and Reggie beat up the light blue Cellmate. In a weird plot twist, it turns out that Purple Cellmate is actually a huge fan of Plankton for his chum, which is like an infinitely useful multi-tool for pulling off crimes apparently. R.A. Penny Pincher. At first I wasn't really going to include this character on the list because he's more of an incidental background character, but believe it or not, he's the guy that sold Mr. Krabs the crane game in the episode Skill Crane, so kind of a big deal. To list off a few of his other appearances to make this video longer and earn me more money, he can be seen working at an office in Don't Feed the Clowns. He gets surprised when seeing the Empty Head Society arriving to town in the episode The Nitwitting, and then again he's seen waiting for the train in Pat the Dog and watches SpongeBob and Patrick roll down the tracks. Reggie Toothy. This guy is mainly just another prisoner alongside Purple Cellmate from the episode Jailbreak. Just like good old PC, Purple Cellmate. from before, this guy's a huge fan of Plankton's chum and its criminal uses. His role in the episode was providing an ingredient to help create some prison toilet chum to help them escape. In return for getting him out, they all help Plankton break into the Krusty Krab after escaping prison, but you know, of course they all get caught and arrested again. Okay, hold your horses, SpongeBob lovers. I actually have a sponsor for today's video, and don't leave because it's good. It's great, even. It is Jack Simpson. You need to check out Jack Simpson right now. He is my roommate, and he makes music, which I think honestly is underrated. And I'm not just being paid to say that. I think it is really good. I came to him with this idea because I thought, you know, it really deserves some more recognition. I'd say it's more like in the indie type of genre with more so like SoundCloud type vocals. I think it's really good. Just give it a shot for yourself. I told him I would double his monthly listeners. I really need y'all to help me out with that. But trust me, I know you'll enjoy it, and just go give it a listen, honestly. All right, now back to some more SpongeBob characters. Woo! Sal is this disheveled looking cook that runs the Slop Pail, a restaurant that Mr. Krabs secretly visits to get his chum for all his various chum needs in the episode The Hankering. After we're introduced to Sal, he decides to close the shop and leaves to go become a movie star. At the end of the episode, he's seen acting for a movie that the main cast of SpongeBob are all watching, Salesman Fish. He may not have an actual name given to him anytime throughout the series, but he does show up a good amount of times. His debut and biggest role is in the episode That's No Lady, where he initially just screams at Patrick to get out of town. This makes Patrick think that this guy is attacking him, as the Salesman Fish follows Patrick throughout the episode, screaming for him to yet again get out of town. In an effort to avoid the threat of big scary yelling man, Patrick cross-dresses as Patricia, you know, Slay, I guess. But in the end, the salesman finds him, and Patrick finally realizes that this guy is just a salesman advertising a vacation to get out of town, and not exactly trying to threaten him. All of his other appearances are pretty basic, except for his role in the DS version of SpongeBob Truth or Square, where his character shows up to sell the player goodies in exchange for happy points. Slasher McGee. He's a pretty short-lived character, but also a very scary looking guy. He appears briefly in the episode Don't Look Now after a foghorn sound is played, and he rides by on a tiny tricycle while wearing a Jason-style hockey mask. Even though this is his only appearance, there's a lot of people that just are absolutely begging for his return to the show. And by a lot of people, I mean these 5 people in the comments below his article. But you know what? Let's get some love going for Slasher McGee in the comments here, because he's just underrated. Swordfish Trucker. There's not really a lot to say about this guy other than, you know, he's a swordfish and he's a trucker. He cameos a good few times throughout the series, but you'll likely know him for his role in the episode Pizza Delivery, where he almost runs over SpongeBob for doing a hitchhiking dance in the middle of the road. Agent Twerp is this guy from the Bogus Business Bureau who helps Plankton steal a Krabby Patty in the episode For Here or To Go. Mr. Krabs is running a competition where any customer could guess how many bun seeds were in a jar that he set out for the annual bun seed guessing contest. Mr. Krabs doesn't let Plankton guess, which leads to him calling Agent Twerp, who makes Mr. Krabs count how many seeds exactly were in the jar. It turns out that Plankton's guess of 500,301 seeds was right, but Mr. Krabs added an addendum that says he also has to sit through a show. Because Agent Twerp and the Bureau are so strict, Plankton also has to wait through the entire puppet show that SpongeBob puts on, and then also eat the Krabby Patty in the premises, which means, you know, he can't steal it and go back to his lab, and all that Plankton nonsense, you know. Author of records books. Otherwise known as Guinness O'Ripley, this guy shows up in the episode Squirrel Record as an official on behalf of the records book. Sandy invites him over because she really wants to get into the book for one of her records and goes through everything record worthy that she can do. In the end, it turns out that she didn't actually break any of the records, but SpongeBob actually broke a record, the most injuries sustained from helping a friend. And then he gets his picture taken for the book instead of Sandy. He also gets his name from a combination of the Guinness World Record book and the Ripley's Believe It or Not franchise. Goodward's lawyers. This is a trio of lawyers that show up in the episode Restraining SpongeBob to place a restraining order on SpongeBob at Squidward's request, which states that he has to stay at least 15 away from Squidward at all times. The lawyers' names are Harry, Comeover, and Bald, and you know, I'm sure you can tell who's who. They're also mentioned in the episode Giant Squidward when Squidward threatens to call his lawyers on SpongeBob yet again. Bill is a tour guide at the Bikini Bottom Mint in the episode Mr. Krabs Takes a Vacation. During the tour, Mr. Krabs gets too excited and childish because, like, you know, money and whatnot, because it's Mr. Krabs. So eventually he gets kicked out by Bill, their tour guide, when he's just fed up with Mr. Krabs. He calls to the security guards to have them escorted out, but it turns out they've been tied up by robbers. Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob manage to stop the heist, and in return they get dollar bills with their faces printed on them, done by Bill. You know, love Bill. Boys Who Cry. They're like a fish boy band in the show that's themed after like stereotypical boy bands at the time, and most notably they perform at Pearl's birthday in season 4. At first, Pearl asks Mr. Krabs to have the boy band appear at her party, but the issue is they charge upwards of $1 million to show up and do their thing. Obviously, Mr. Krabs can't pay this much, so he does the next best thing and has Squidward perform instead. This, in theory, isn't actually too bad because Squidward is also a huge mega fan of Boys Who Cry, and canonically knows all their lyrics by heart. For some reason though, when Squidward performs at her birthday party, Pearl just isn't a big fan, and he gets booed off of stage after singing about foreplay and whatnot. I'm sure y'all remember that. In a better turn of events though, when opening her gifts, Pearl finds one from SpongeBob. When opened, it's The Boys Who Cry, somehow in the box, of course. They then perform for everyone at the party, with Squidward probably enjoying it the most, honestly. The band never appears on screen any other time aside from 2 episodes where their posters can be seen in Pearl's room, as well as a magazine in Pearl's room that has a bunch of lipstick marks over the boy band. The state officer is this tall orange fish who works for the government and plays an important role in the episode Move It or Lose It. He shows up to the Krusty Krab but notices that it's located within 100 yards of the chum bucket, which is obviously in violation of the city ordinance for 2 restaurants. This leads to a dispute between Mr. Krabs and Plankton, as one of them is going to have to move their building over. The state officer appears again at the end of the episode alongside a bulldozer, preparing to demolish one of the establishments. SpongeBob then convinces him to use the bulldozer to just push the Krusty Krab back an inch, which would put them in compliance with the law. However, after this, SpongeBob runs up to the state officer and hugs him, which causes the bulldozer to go in reverse and destroy the chum bucket anyways. Captain Frosty Mug is the primary teacher at the Milkshake Academy in the episode License to Milkshake. In the episode, SpongeBob randomly gets an order for a milkshake but is overwhelmingly untrained in doing this, so he whips together what he can and the customer claims it to be horrible and demands a refund. Upon seeing this take place, Mr. Krabs decides to send SpongeBob to Milkshake Academy, where we get introduced to Captain Frosty Mug. Even though the school's whole purpose is just making milkshakes, Captain Frosty Mug treats it like a very serious military academy. He singles out SpongeBob specifically from a line of cadets and has him make a milkshake in front of everyone using the shake simulator, even before any training. After failing miserably, Frosty Mug deems him an unteachable moron, but he decides to go through with the whole training montage, teaching SpongeBob everything there is to know about the art of milkshakes. We then cut to the milkshake license ceremony, where everyone but SpongeBob gets their license because he couldn't even get past the first step of making a milkshake. Frosty Mug then attempts to demonstrate how to make a milkshake, but he tenses up and we're sent to a flashback where he used to work at this place called The Milkshake, and we can see Frosty Mug making a fool out of himself trying to just blend up ice cream. Cut back to the present and he gets his hand stuck in the machine, which throws him around violently until SpongeBob comes in to save him. Frosty Mug appears one more time at the end of the episode in a wheelchair at the Krusty Krab, where he presents SpongeBob with his very own milkshake license. As a thanks for saving him and teaching him that, you know, good milkshakes don't come from the machine. They come from in here. So true, Frosty Mug. So true. The champion wrestlers appear in the episode Krusty Crushers at a wrestling tournament in Bikini Bottom in which anyone could beat the 2 of them and win the grand prize of $1 million. After hearing about this, Mr. Krabs sends in SpongeBob and Patrick to go fight for him. Hopefully all of y'all remember the scene in which the 2 of them just get absolutely brutalized by the champion wrestlers, including things like being crushed into a liquid inside of a bucket, drank, swished around, spit out, sucked into a drain, and then being chopped up, put into a cement truck, turned into cement, and being poured out to be stepped on. Then finally, the 2 wrestlers attempt to do a headfirst dive from hundreds of feet in the air onto SpongeBob and Patrick. But right before they land, Patrick unveils his iron ass, which he'd been training for weeks on end. When the 2 wrestlers land headfirst onto the iron ass, they just completely crumple, man. Chiny McGee. This character isn't the most complex, but pretty much he shows up in the episode Cracked Crabs for the cheapest crab contest. During an argument between 2 other crabs about how they spent only a cent to travel to the competition, my main man Chiny pops out of one of their suitcases to explain that, you know, he didn't have to spend any money at all to travel. But honestly, that's about as far as it goes for good old Chiny McGee. Someone a little bit more interesting here, Colonel Parker is a concert manager who is the main antagonist in the episode Hello Bikini Bottom. At the start of the episode, he overhears SpongeBob and Squidward performing some music and proposes to them that he be their band manager. But Mr. Krabs quickly sees an opportunity to make himself more money and forces SpongeBob and Patrick to let him manage the band on his own, even though Mr. Krabs has no experience in band management at all, as opposed to the actual professional Colonel Parker. He then appears later on outside the performance of Ned and the Needlefish, gloating to Mr. Krabs about how he's just way better at being a manager, and orders his 2 roadies to trash Mr. Krabs' sound equipment. Even though while doing this, Mr. Krabs is just stealing all of his more professional sound equipment behind his back. Of course, Carper eventually figures out what he did and shows up later pissed off and sues him for all of his money, as well as taking the equipment back. Even later on, he shows up again after SpongeBob and Squidward's band still manages to be successful, so he has his roadies basically just rob Mr. Krabs for all the money they've made on tour. And that's about it for him. He only really shows up one more time as a guest who accidentally squashes Plankton later on in the show, but beyond that, never really redeems himself himself after being such a dick. Also, fun fact, he's actually named after Colonel Parker, who is actually Elvis Presley's manager, and his character is of course dressed like Elvis Presley himself. The SpongeBob Drifter is a background character who appears briefly in the episode No Weenies Allowed. In this episode, the actual SpongeBob is doing everything he can to get into the salty spittoon, but he's just not tough enough. After repeated attempts and being rejected by the bouncer Reggie, this guy shows up who looks exactly like SpongeBob, which Reggie mistakes him for, but after trying to pull off what he thought was a wig, Reggie realizes it's just a different guy. Then the actual SpongeBob shows up wearing a rainbow wig, and Reggie lets in the similar looking Drifter, never to be seen again. Well, not exactly, because he appears one more time in Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated in a picture in SpongeBob's bedroom, for, whatever reason. Girly Teen Girl is a sponge that looks exactly like SpongeBob would if he was just cross-dressing. That assumption is made so easily because in the episode she appears in, The Slumber Party, SpongeBob is trying to get into Pearl's sleepover, which honestly is kind of odd given that he's like an older line cook and they're teenage girls, but Girly Teen Girl and her girly pop pussy slay queen self, sorry for that, shows up at Pearl's door trying to get into the party but is rejected as all the girls throw tomatoes at her thinking it was a cross-dressing SpongeBob. Then she drives away stating that she's moving back to Farawayville. This is also just basically the same joke made on the last entry, but this time it's a girl version of SpongeBob. Granny is this older unnamed lady who appears in multiple episodes just kind of as a fill-in for an old lady character. She does play a pretty big role in the episode Have You Seen This Snail? After Gary runs away from home and finds shelter with Granny. While he's there, Granny keeps calling him Miss Tufsy, which leads Gary to realize she has had plenty of other pets, but none of them are actually around anymore. Interesting. Eventually, Gary looks in a closet and finds a bunch of empty broken shells from other snails. He realizes that Granny is just fattening him up with the prospect of eventually eating him like all the other previous snails who had stayed with her. Once he realizes this, Gary escapes and runs back to Bikini Bottom, being chased after by Granny, offering him more of her cookies. Eventually, Gary gets trapped in an alleyway with Granny and a bunch of other tough snails from earlier in the episode. In order to save himself, Gary pushes one of the tough snails onto the sidewalk for Granny to take in his place. So he pretty much just sent this random street snail off to his death. This was her only major appearance in the show, but she appears a couple other times, like in the episode Shuffleboarding, where she gets arrested for being too old by SpongeBob and Patrick, who were pretending to be Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Jack Kahuna Laguna is a surfer that ends up teaching SpongeBob how to get off an island after SpongeBob gets deserted on this island. This happens in the special episode SpongeBob SquarePants vs. the Big One, in which Mr. Krabs decides to move his business into the middle of the sea at Goo Lagoon because it was just too hot everywhere else. Due to Patrick messing around, the ship flips and they all get lost at sea. Eventually, SpongeBob and Patrick end up on an island where they meet a group of junior college dropouts who also got stranded there and just kind of surf all day long now. They tell them that the only way to get off the island is by surfing out, and that they could learn from JKL, Jack Kahuna Laguna. Once they find him, they proceed to watch him mystically surf waves for 2.5 hours on this ridiculously long board. Wanting to learn more, he instructs them to stare into a fire he built, claiming it will show them the secrets of surfing, which Squidward deems to be ridiculous. The next day, they all have more practical surfing lessons from JKL until he goes off to a temple where they all follow him. Once they get there, JKL explains that once every 1,000 years, the planets will align in such a way as to make the perfect wave known as the Big One, and that time had come. In theory, they can use this wave to get back to Bikini Bottom, but the catch is that the Big One requires a sacrifice to help the surfers out. As they all go out on the wave, JKL ends up being the one who decides to sacrifice himself and helps everyone get back home. As they finish the surf back home, the tribute songs plays in honor of him. However, it turns out JKL somehow survived the Big One's sacrificial requirement, and the episode ends with all of them dancing together in a luau in Bikini Bottom. Also, no matter how cool Jack Kahuna Laguna and this entire episode is, it just doesn't actually even make sense because they're underwater, if you remember, and they're on a beach underwater with waves and an ocean, but they're all already in it. I don't know, man. Nosferatu is quite possibly the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my entire life. He has a short but truly disturbing cameo in the episode Graveyard Shift. In the episode, SpongeBob has to work the night shift and is berated with spooky stories about the restaurant's past by Squidward, who's also working in the night shift with him. Toward the end of the night, after being scared by the story of the hash-slinging slasher, SpongeBob is on edge when he notices the lights flickering from inside the Krusty Krab, which is an issue because flickering lights is a sign that the hash-slinging slasher is about to arrive, as told in the story. But it turns out it was just Nosferatu, and they all laugh along with him and notice that he's been the one flickering the lights, as if he isn't some horrifying real-life image of a vampire standing in the doorway. Of course, Nosferatu is an actual character from the 1992 film Nosferatu, which is why he looks so odd being here in SpongeBob, because he's not even animated. It's just him. He appears a few other times as if everyone just knows who this guy is, like in the episode Captain Pipsqueak, where he tries out for the organization Evil and presents his skill of being a mime on stage just to get zapped by Man Ray, who thinks being a mime is his evil power, and it's just who scary. Which honestly, miming is pretty damn sinister and evil if you ask me. But through researching his appearances in the show, I found out something that I'm sure most of y'all don't really know, but he actually has a kid named Kid Feratu. Now stay with me, okay? It's in the spin-off show Camp Coral. He's primarily just like the weird kid in the show that hides from the light and is overall kind of a weird guy. Rarg is quite possibly one of the best characters to have ever featured in the show, and he appears on the episode The Monster Who Came to Bikini Bottom. In the episode, Patrick accidentally opens a can of toxic waste and pours it onto a group of purple barnacles, which causes them to mutate together to become a giant monster known as Rarg. Despite his ghoulish appearance, Patrick becomes friends with the monster as they partake in a bunch of, childish activities together, as Patrick would do. Patrick wants to show off his new friend to SpongeBob and takes him back to the house to try and let him stay under the rock, but he's just way too big to fit in there and ends up breaking it. On accident, Rarg also destroys the other two houses there and is captured by Bikini Bottom police until the cop Fred sneezes into his microphone and agitates Rarg, causing him to go absolutely nuts and start rampaging through the town. He eventually gets captured by the police again after wreaking havoc on Bikini Bottom, but SpongeBob comes up with the idea to send him to a snowy mountain where he can have him get ice for the customers at the Krusty Krab. Now whenever someone needs ice, SpongeBob will call Patrick and ask Rarg to smash a big block off the mountain and toss cubes at the Krusty Krab when the ice machine is broken. But I really doubt he's getting paid much above minimum wage, which is just like 3 shells and a horseshoe at the Krusty Krab, I'm sure. Alright, another horrifying monster to close out this list, we've got the appetizer from the episode Squilliam Returns. In the episode, Squidward makes the Krusty Krab try to be fancy to impress Squilliam. Mr. Krabs orders SpongeBob to work as a fancy waiter and claims that he's a great cook from his days in the Navy as the chef. He starts to work on some peas he was cooking, and as they explode, Squidward comes in to see what went wrong and notices the mess that Mr. Krabs made of the kitchen. Squidward is confused because he claimed that he was the head chef on the SS Gourmet, but Mr. Krabs said that he must have misheard him and restates that he was only ever the janitor on the SS Gourmet, but he was the head chef on the SS Diarrhea. Later on in the episode, we get the only appearance of the appetizer in monster form as it comes out of the kitchen and starts to attack the customers. It's never actually explained why the can of peas came to life and became the appetizer monster, but it's not really too surprising given that Mr. Krabs is the one that cooked it. So that's all the SpongeBob characters I got for y'all today. Again, you should check out Jack Simpson. I would really appreciate it. I know he would too. And also, I think you should subscribe if you made it this far, because it took me so long editing. I've gone gray and whatnot. It's been so stressful, You should definitely subscribe. But seriously, I appreciate y'all for making it this far in the video, and I hope you have a good day.